I'm making this video in the middle of the semester, and I just want to talk a little bit more about the process of asking questions, deciding what questions we should ask the government when we are working on different projects. And I'd like to use emergency alert system as an example. I noticed that students have been writing reflective learning journal in the Moodle discussion forum, and my impression is that most of you are simply describing what happened in terms of what you did or what advice or suggestions you get from the teacher. It's pretty descriptive, and that's useful. Of course, you need to document the whole process of doing the project, so whatever records that you shared through Moodle would be very helpful. But then at the same time, I think we need to do more than that. We also need to think about the learning process, think about how you have learned from the school. What is learning? This is a more fundamental question. I think learning can be defined as the process of how you will change your behavior. Before you take this course, when you are trying to deal with this problem, maybe this is how you're going to do it. So this is your behavior A before taking this course, and if you are asked to work on a project, and you're going to do this behavior A. And then after taking this course, after you work with the tutors who are more experienced than you, and you went through all the process of asking questions during the project, now you're going to do something different. And imagine you're going to work on a different project of similar nature, and you will be able to pick up a couple of techniques and strategies that you learned from this course, and you're going to do things differently. So this is what I understand as learning happened when you are going to do things differently, and that's how you undertook some changes. And I think that's very important. You have to show us this evidence, and then you need to convince us that this course has made a difference in your intellectual life, change a little bit as a student, as a citizen as well, because we are very proud of this course. This course is unlike any other courses that you have taken or you can ever take in this university, in that we are dealing with very practical issues, real issues in our society, and we are asking very important questions, and that will this government staff, they will take it very seriously. They have to. And these are important questions. I don't know how many students taking this course will eventually be able to do things like what we are doing, but at least this is what we are trying to do here. We want to convince you that this is a new model, and this is a feasible model, and this is a model that's worth learning. I want to use the emergency alert system as an example because this is what happened a few months ago in March 2022, and I guess everybody got this message from emergency alert system. And eventually I work with the two students as a team, so we are going to work on this project and try to work on this project and try to help the government to do a better job. Before you even continue watching, this video and listen to what I have to say, you can maybe just do a very quick search, something like MP Hong Kong, and you will be able to find some news about this emergency alert system. And so go ahead and read through whatever information you can get from the internet and think about, if you are going to do this project, how I do it. Actually, I'm looking for some help. I work with my colleague Ben and probably get some student helpers to build something more systematic, something like a self-access learning package. I will ask you a couple of questions to guide you through the process. But before we have that resources available, maybe you can just look at this emergency alert system and what questions you are going to ask if you want to help the government to improve the system or improve what they've been doing. So just think about this a little bit. And for those of you who have been working on some different projects, could be a good exercise as well. Just give some thoughts to this whole idea, this whole project, and what you have learned from other projects that you have been doing that can be relevant to doing this project. So we're talking about transferable skills here, something that needs to be transferred, and that's the real learning. If you only learn to do one project from this course, if all you learn is just to do one project, that's not real learning. You have to identify a set of skills and the strategies and the way of thinking which you learn from this project that can be transferred to different contexts. You will be able to do a different project independently without help or input from us. Then that will be the value of taking this course. And as near the end of the semester, it's halfway through now, we need to start thinking about assessment. And how can you get a good grade? You have to convince us that you have learned. So what I'm going to do is just walk you through all the questions that we have eventually we came up with. Or I work with two students, and maybe these questions will help you to think about what are the strategies and skills that you can learn from this course. So the first question is that it was reported that the system cost 150 million Hong Kong dollars to build. What we are asking here is to provide a tender document. The reason why we want the tender document is because if you get a copy of the tender document, you will get a much more information, probably more information that you need about how the system actually works. That's probably the first reason. And also, possibly, if you look at the tender document, you will get a sense of why it costs so much. And we also asked for them to provide an overview of how the system works with some technical information that is intelligible to people with no training in engineering. We asked this because I don't have any training in engineering. I did have a minor in computer science from my undergraduate more than 20 years ago. But other than that, I only have training. So it's really about the government needs to inform the people, the general public, with no specialized training. So that's why we asked this. We don't know how they're going to respond to this question, but we don't even know whether they have done any tendering. If they have not done any for this project, then we will have to ask another question: is why didn't you do tendering for such a big project? You see what I mean? So could you inform us the process of inviting and reviewing the tendering bids for building the system? Could you explain how the cost could be estimated before tendering? We are getting into some pretty hot water because this is pretty. This is something that the government needs to explain. How about that? What happened is actually we found this document which is from the Legislative Council. And among these documents, I mean, among this item for finance committee, there's one document about alert system. So installation of emergency alert system, blah blah blah, and then there's enclosure B8. So to find this document is really important. But how can we find this document? I think I showed you how to do it. You just use Google site specific search. Site column legco.gov.hk. Only search the Legislative Council website and then you put emergency alert. Bingo! That's how you reach this document. You see what I mean? And if you did not manage to find something useful, or if your teacher helped you to find a document like this, fine, that's okay. But then you better write about it in your journal because you have to convince us that next time around when you do another project, you're going to know how to do this. This piece of document is really important. Without this document, we won't be able to ask all the questions. You see what I mean? So what's funny about this is that basically the government is able to ask for 150 million Hong Kong dollars before tendering. That for me is really puzzling because I'm involved in a university project. It's an inter-university project. The lead university is actually HKUST, and I was involved in the whole tendering process for a project which is about half a million Hong Kong dollars. We received 4 or 5 proposals in response to our tender, and there's a huge range in terms of the amount of money the companies are asking for. So I would imagine if they are going to invite companies to do this project through tendering, there should be a range of costs that the government can then consider based on the tender, based on the proposal, they can decide how much money they're going to spend. But now they are asking, they're saying, okay, even I don't know, is it before the tendering or after tendering? They just basically come up with this number, and it seems like eventually they spend this much, 150 million Hong Kong dollars, to build a system. That's why we asked this question. We want them to explain. I have no idea how they're going to respond to this. One of the staff member from this government, I think it's Office of Communications or something, a communication authority. She actually phone called me. She called me and she asked some questions about our project, blah blah blah. So apparently the supervisor is looking into this. But yeah, so that's the second question. And also, we want to ask for the annual maintenance cost. The reason why we want to ask annual maintenance cost is because I know that number is not going to be trivial. And I know this because we did some project on e-health. So look at our previous letters on e-health. If I remember correctly, there's at least 100 million, probably more, probably 200 million or something Hong Kong dollars, which the government have to spend just to maintain the e-health system. So annual maintenance cost is definitely something we have to look at. So I'm guessing they will have to spend at least 10 million or something around that range to maintain the system. And of course, we want to know what does that involve. And number four is we list the scenarios under which the system could be launched and indicate which government departments, bureaus, and offices have the authority to activate the system. Now, this is about how the system would actually be used. And the reason why we want to ask this question is because we feel that emergency alert system is only a small part of a larger, broader system for our city to respond to a wide range of emergencies. So, of course, at some point, the government will have to send a message to the entire society within a few minutes, which is what the system is about. But then in order for this system to create more value for the society, we need to also figure out, what are the other things, what are the protocols the government has to follow in case of emergency to protect the city, to mobilize the resources in response to an emergency. And my concern is that they build a system without some more coherent plan for different types of emergencies. So I would argue that in order for our city to be prepared for all kinds of emergencies, we need more than just this emergency alert system. We need a much more systematic approach, a series of plans and protocols which involve a wide range of government departments and bureaus that can eventually prepare our city for the emergency. And one challenge about this is that we have no idea. We have no idea what kind of emergencies we're dealing with. It's all just a simulation. It's all hypothesis and it's all thought experiments. But I'm not saying that we shouldn't do it. We should definitely do it because even though the likelihood or probability of having this kind of emergency is very small, we're talking about, I don't know, 1 out of 10,000 or something. But the cost that can we have to incur without being prepared, that could be enormous. And as a result, we still need to be prepared for this kind of event with relatively small probability. I hope I made that reasoning clear. This is not my reasoning. There's actually scientists, researchers who have made similar arguments. But as I said, we can't just say, hey, let's build an emergency alert system. Of course, we need that, but we also need to know the scenarios. We need to know which government departments is responsible for what kind of scenarios, and do they have a plan for the city other than being able to send out a short message. So that's number four. Question number four is about. And frankly speaking, I think this question can lead to a couple of other projects that we can do in future. Because for different scenarios, different kind of emergencies, we need to look at how well prepared is Hong Kong government for that particular type of emergency. And then we can look at how other cities, other countries like Singapore, like US, New Zealand, how they've been doing this similar things. So I would say this a couple of other projects that we can do in future. But finding the answers for question number four would give us some basic data and information for us to work on. So for each scenario and government agency, please indicate whether it is extreme alert, emergency alert, or emergency alert. So these are the two types of messages that the system can send out, and to describe the workflow and protocols for sending out the messages. Frankly speaking, I don't think the Office for Communication Authorities, which is the agency that we are writing to for information, I don't think that office is able to answer this question, because the office is only the department responsible for implementing the system. But who is going to actually use the system? That's actually beyond the authority of this particular office. So when the office staff phone me and ask me question, I actually told her some of the issues is not for you to answer. You have to refer the question to other departments or bureaus. I don't know whether they can do that. But once they answer this question, I'm pretty sure that we can follow up. And when the public receives this message, what is the display name and number of the sender? How can the public verify that the message is from the government? So this is actually a question that I've been thinking. When I get a message, a short message, what is called short service text message, whatever. So sometimes we are quite suspicious. Even these days, there's so many scammers and everything. How can we know that this is actually a legitimate, bona fide message from the government? That's another very important question. Actually, I have some solution for this. I think what they should do is to include a link in the message. So that link will lead to a government website where more information about this particular message will be provided. So whoever is not sure whether this message is legitimate, they can click on the link, and then they can go to that government website to verify it. And this is part of the larger system that the government has to build in order to prepare the city for emergency. And I'm not sure they have that in place just so. I feel a little bit concerned that whoever is doing this, all they care about is just to build that system with the 150 million Hong Kong dollars. They don't have the kind of the big picture mindset in mind. You need to actually deal with a more important, much more important issue, which is how to systematically prepare the city um, for emergencies. So that's something we need to work on. We have to help the government to do a better job. The last question is going back to this document. This is the reason why I said this document is so important, because if you did not get this document, you won't be able to get all the information. And frankly speaking, even this journalist, I don't think they find this document. They probably should take my course, because without actually I haven't looked at this, but it seems like they're not aware that before the system was built, they had a different arrangement. So what happened is, at present, so this is before the system, there are urgent and important messages they need to widely disseminate. So the government will need to seek the assistance of local mobile network operators to use their short message services pursuant to the agreement reached with them in 2008. So this was like 14 years ago. But then in the last 12 months, I think this is a typo. It should be in the last 12 years, the government used this mode of message dissemination 12 times. So now this information is really important, because it told us before the emergency alert system was built, there was a solution. There was a solution, which is to send a message through the mobile network operators. But of course, that solution has some limitations or weaknesses, because it would take 4 hours or more to reach all the mobile telephone subscribers. So that's clearly a weakness. But now look at the number here. In the last 12 years, I don't know whether it's 12 months or 12 years. It could be 12. It could be 12 months. That would one message per month, or it could be 12 years. I guess we have to follow up and make sure that this is actually 12. If it's 12 months, then we have to send a message and ask for the records for the past 12 years or something. But I suspect that most likely it's going to be 12 years, because they're talking about 208, and then this is 2020, so it's most likely it's going to be 12 years. But anyway, so this is typo which we already asked the government to clarify. Now, assuming that this is a typo, that there's a 12 emergency messages sent in the past 12 years, we would like to look at all the 12 messages, because if you only look at this one message, it's really hard to tell, you know, how the system will be used in different contexts. But if you have 12 messages or even more messages, you have a larger set of data, then we can probably get more information about how this is going to work. Yeah, so as you can see, these are the questions we asked. Now, the questions for you, and probably for anyone who would like to help me with this course material development, is number one, that based on the questions we just asked, what can you learn if you are going to work on a very different project? How can the techniques and strategies that we demonstrated in this project can be applied in your context? And for students who have been working on your project for this course, you can compare the questions that you raised for the government for your project with the questions here and see how there might be some similar strategies or techniques. But then the next question is, of course, we haven't got the answers yet, but hopefully we will receive some replies from the government very soon. So you need to anticipate what answers you might be able to get from the government, and also in terms of how you can then develop the arguments in the South China Morning Post. I can already imagine near the end of the semester, I will have to go through a whole kind of emotional experience that happened every time when I get a reply from the government. I feel like the staff was not taking it seriously, or they failed to provide the information we're asking for. And then I will start writing some really angry messages to their supervisors, to someone who is at a higher level, sometimes ombudsman, chief executive office, blah blah blah. So I hope that this time around they will be more informative and helpful. But anyway, so let's see how what will happen. But my point here is that at this point, while we're waiting for the governments to respond, we already need to think about what arguments we can make in the newspaper. You don't want to wait until the government reply and then you start, oh, we can now write a letter to the editor. So how are you going to do it? Okay. If you want to do well in this course, you need to be proactive and you have to start drafting the letter now while we are waiting for the government to reply. But then going back to the learning process, let me just very quickly go through some of the questions and think about what lessons we can learn here. Obviously, one important question we should ask about any system or any kind of program is we need to figure out how it works. We need to know more details, the whole process of how the system works. So that's why the first question is so important. And whenever we are evaluating a government program, if it is possible, we should look at the cost, look at the amount of money spent, because we are taxpayers. It's our money, so that's why every dollar from us needs to be justified. You see what I mean? So that's a more general question, a more general lesson we can learn from this process. And obviously, we should dig out the documents. You know, sometimes even we have to do a better job than the journalists because they may not know how to find this document. But we have the techniques, we have the strategies to do it. So do find out the important the document, so that document will give us the insights, and then we will be able to request further information, such as how the government decided to send out all 12 emergency messages in the past 12 years. Hopefully it's 12 years. If it's 12 months, then we need to ask even more data. So I just look at some of the questions we have to answer here in terms of what learning can. I hope this video would be useful for you to think about what you have learned from this course, and you will be able to write reflective learning journals more effectively, and you will be able to get a better grades. And I personally I find this project very exciting because I think we're onto something. You know, I mean, frankly speaking, the money is already spent. 150 million is already spent. There's really not much we can do now. But I think it's always important to review how decisions are made by the government when it comes to spending money. 150 million is not a whole lot of compared to the budgets of the home government every year, the reserve we have, and everything. But still, it's quite a substantive amount of money. So I'm very surprised that they are able to get away with this finance committee of legislative council. If the government is able to do something without tendering, or they are able to estimate the amount of the cost of the project without tendering, and the finance committee can just endorse whatever the government is asking. I don't think this is good for our society. So I think we should look into it and make sure that people who are making these kind of decisions needs to be held accountable.